Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and we are reading Nora Roberts' Legacy. If you haven't started this book, I don't know what you're waiting for. I am enjoying it so much. I'm kind of biased because Nora Roberts is my favorite author. I've been reading her for about 19 years now, I want to say. I got my very first book of hers when, I want to say, the summer before I turned 15. And so I've been reading her a long time, and it's very rare that she surprises me. And she actually surprised me reading these last 4 chapters. We just finished chapters 5 through 8. And that doesn't happen very often when I'm reading her because I know her writing style and kind of her pattern. And so I have to say I was surprised reading these chapters. I do want to say this video is going to have some pretty big spoilers. There's some big things that happen in these chapters. So if you're not all caught up, we just finished chapters 5 through 8, then definitely get caught up and then come back to this video to participate because there are some big spoilers. And I do also want to add a trigger warning. There is a car accident and a school shooting in these chapters. And if that's something that touches you on a more personal level, definitely just be prepared that we are going to be discussing that as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start, of course, with chapter 5. And we are introduced to Harry in this chapter. How do you think he is a good balance of someone Adrian can trust both personally and professionally? And I think, obviously, we see the professional value in him. He's in the business that she's trying to create a brand under. He knows, the demographic that she's aiming towards and everything like that. And so, he's someone her mom trusts with her business. And so there's definitely, she can trust him on that level. And then she's known him since she was a baby as well. And I think on a personal level, we see that he's pretty trustworthy, and that she does have that trust in him because when he tells her that he won't tell her mom about the snacks, like, she doesn't question that at all. And then same thing when he tells her that he'll go to bat for her, and kind of act as a go-between her and her mom. She doesn't question that either. And I think, he's able to kind of persuade her to utilize her mom's company to distribute her videos, and why she really, really wanted to do this on her own. She wanted to create her own brand and create her own videos and didn't want it to be related to her mom at all. And he's able to kind of talk her into that, but at the same time, he respects what she wants to do. So he doesn't try, at least not very hard, to talk her into using like the production equipment and everything as far as those resources. She's still making these videos on her own, and she's still creating her own brand, but she's distributing it under the umbrella of her mother's company instead of starting like a whole brand new company from scratch. And I don't think if they had that personal relationship, he would have been able to talk her into it so easily, even though they do have that professional, he knows what he's talking about professionally. So I do think he's a good balance. He respects what she's trying to do, and then he's also looking out for her best interest as well on both a personal and a professional level. So that was kind of my thoughts on it. And then the next question is, Lena gets emotional over Harry's news of having a baby with his partner via surrogacy. Why do you think she is able to let her walls down around him and show a more vulnerable side? And I think because she trusts him and respects him on a professional level, that she is really able to kind of let her walls down. Like, she trusts him with the most important thing in her life, like the thing that keeps her going, and drives her life. And the fact that she's able to trust him with that, I think, helps her break down her walls on a personal level, because she doesn't break down her walls. Like, she's very closed off, like even with her parents and Adrian. And so the fact that she's able to have that relationship, I think, speaks to how much she values him on a professional level, and it also, I think, speaks to his character as well. Like I said, he's kind of very straightforward, very honest, and very trustworthy as well. My next question is, last week we touched on the similarities between Adrian and Lena's drive and ambition. In this chapter, Adrian uses the fact that Lena started from scratch as part of her argument for her wanting to do the project on her own. How is Adrian striking out on her own both similar and different from when Lena started her business? And I think obviously there's the similarities there. They're both trying to start this fitness brand and make their own mark in that world, and kind of build their own brand from the bottom up. But Adrian kind of has a leg up, and that's one of the reasons why she didn't want to utilize her mom's company at all. She wanted to do this on her own because she recognizes that she has that leg up, and even if she didn't use her mom's company to distribute her brand, under the umbrella of her mom's company, she still had a leg up because she grew up in this business and she has that knowledge base already. And then she's also not leaving home, like she's still at home, and she also has the financial resources, based on what her mom has made. Where with Lena, she left home. She didn't have the prior knowledge. Like I think she had some prior business knowledge because obviously her mom and dad run a restaurant, but it's a very different type of business, and she had to build this brand literally from scratch, with knowing nothing and just kind of having to learn as she went. And I think that's where the key difference definitely is. So last question for this chapter is: Adrian receives her first death threat, which her mom brushes off as part of the territory. Based on what we know so far, who do you think is likely sending the threats? And I want you to pause here and give me your answers down in the comments. Now, obviously, we don't know like a specific character yet, but who do you think? How do you think they're connected to Adrian? That's kind of what the answer I'm looking for. So definitely, like I said, pause the video and go down to the comments real quick and then come back. And so my thoughts on it, based on what we know so far and reading Nora Roberts for almost 20 years, is that it's one of the children of her biological dad. I really think that's the case, and that's why they're so focused on her and kind of making her the last one, because she didn't, her mom did, but that's how her father's life ended. And so I really think that's the case, and I'm excited to see. But like I said, and I don't think we've been introduced to the character yet, but I do think we will be introduced to the character once Adrian, once Adrian kind of moves back home. I do think we're going to be introduced to the poet. It's just I don't think we have been yet, but I do think it's going to be one of the children of her father, because we know her biological father has other children based on the first chapter. So that's kind of my thought, and it will be interesting to see going forward if I'm right and if you guys are right, if your thoughts aligned with me, especially if you haven't read Nora Roberts before. But let's go ahead and get into chapter 6 now. This chapter starts with the poet's point of view. They seem to target specific women. What do you think their criteria is for choosing victims? And I think because going into chapter 7 and 8, we see multiple victims. We kind of see the poet's point of view and the different women he's stalking. And I think it's women who, I kind of have a couple different theories. I think either it's women who are home wreckers, and that's kind of his criteria, because the first woman is divorced and on a date with a new man. And then later on, he targets a woman who's having an affair. And so I think that's kind of his criteria. But then there's also a third victim that doesn't really say anything about, divorce or an affair or anything like that. And so my other theory is it's either women his father has slept with or had slept with, or it's other illegitimate children of his father. I don't know the illegitimate children. It could be a combination of both, because I think if it was, I don't know. I think it might be kind of a combination, because I think if it was women that his father slept with, he would also target Lena, but he's really not. He's really focused on Adrian. But at the same time, if it's other illegitimate children, how does he know? And why is it only women? And so I think it might be a combination of some sort of those. But that's kind of the theories I'm working with right now. And like I said, we'll see going forward, what it actually is. But that's kind of what I'm working with right now. And then Adrian runs into Raylan and his brand new fiancee, Laura Lee. To celebrate, she orders a bottle of champagne for their table. Later, she receives a thank you note from Laura Lee, which she keeps, even though she's not the sentimental type. Do you think this is foreshadowing anything? And I definitely thought it was because of how specific the author was and how she pointed it out. But I kind of ran through like a bunch of different theories and such because I thought maybe Laura Lee's the poet, but that didn't really fit, especially the way she's describing Laura Lee and then the way Raylan and Laura Lee are interacting with each other. I really didn't think that was the case. And so I thought, well, maybe there's a connection with the poet. But again, I didn't really think that was the case. And then as we continue to read into chapter 7, we see that Adrian sends a handwritten note telling them that she's not going to be able to make the wedding, and that starts a correspondence between the two women for years, and they develop a friendship through that. And so I think that's kind of the significance of her keeping that initial thank you note, was she kind of recognized something in Laura Lee and knew there was going to be something built there. And so I think that's kind of what it was foreshadowing. Not so much foreshadowing, but really signifying, there was going to be this deep connection between these two women. And so that was kind of my thought on it. And then next, what do you think of Adrian's ability to maintain her friendships with the nerd group and still incorporate them into her professional life? And I really think it's typical for people to grow apart, especially after high school, as they start going to colleges in different areas and kind of start their own life. But with Adrian, we see she maintains those friendships, and then she also maintains them on a professional level. Like, she still incorporates them, the core group that started her brand, with each video set that she does. And I just think that shows how much value she puts on not only their friendship, but also them, starting the brand with her and being such an important part of that. And I just think it shows the loyalty, the loyalty that Adrian has, and the value she puts on her friendships for sure, especially with Hector and Lauren. Obviously Tisha, they went to college together, they were roommates, and then they moved out and got a place together, and Tisha has continued to work with her this whole time, where Hector and Lauren kind of went off and did their own thing, but they still, continue to help her with her brand, and they still maintain that friendship. So, and then the last question for this chapter, Adrian uses her Nana, her grandma, Sophia, in a short video stream. Her next annual poem targets Sophia directly. Do you think the threat is real or just a way to further rattle Adrian and let her know they are keeping tabs on her? And I'm going to discuss this a little bit more later on in the discussion questions, but originally I thought it was just kind of a way for them to rattle Adrian, and I also kind of thought they were probably angry seeing how happy Adrian is, dancing around and doing a workout with her grandma. And so they were probably angry and were trying to get that venom, that hatred out. But I don't think it was serious. But later on, we know going forward, big spoilers start here, that Sophia, gets into a car accident, and we know she's sideswiped by another driver. And so I think the poet had something to do with that. But we also see that it's several years later, and it doesn't really fit the poet's criteria. But I'll get more into that and my thoughts on it as we go forward. But yeah, initially I thought it was just kind of an empty threat and a way to rattle Adrian and kind of get their hatred out. But I think later on it does turn into something. So that's it for chapter 6. Chapter 7's the big one, and so let's go ahead and get into it. And so my first question is, we see Raylan and Laura Lee living in New York with 2 kids and trying for a third and a puppy on top. How does this compare not only to his childhood, but to Adrian's? And I think it's kind of the perfect blend of the two. You know, he grew up in a small town. His mom was a single mom, but they had like that ideal family life, you know, house, a yard. You know, he could run around and play as a kid. I'm pretty sure they had a dog. I think that's mentioned. Um, and then Adrian grew up in New York and didn't have the typical lifestyle. There was a lot of travel. She wasn't able to just kind of be a kid and run around. And I think it shows, you know, that you can have both because he's in New York, he's creating his own brand in graphic novels and creating this whole business from the ground up. But at the same time, he has the ideal family dynamic. You know, he has the house with the wife and kids and a dog. And so it just shows that you can have both. Like, you can be in the city and pursuing your dreams and building a brand while still having that ideal family life as well. And then next, big sad one is Raylan gets a call about Sophia, Adrian's grandmother's car accident. Do you think it was an accident? If not, why do you think the poet waited so long? And so, like I touched on, I don't think it was an accident. I do think the poet has something to do with it. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more on this later on. But I think the reason they waited so long is because it's kind of part of their plan. Um, or maybe like if I'm completely off base there, maybe just that hatred kind of kept festering and festering, and then finally, you know, he took it out. But it kind of throws you off because Sophia doesn't fit the criteria for how he's choosing women, and then also the way, if he is involved, the way he caused the accident isn't typical for his mo. We know he likes a more be like right there. He likes guns, knives, and bats, but even with the gun, he is right there with the women he's killing. And so I think, you know, that kind of throws it off, but at the same time, which is why I think it has more to do with a plan than just like a festering hatred. But like I said, I'll touch more on that later on. So, um, next, Adrian and Raylan lose Sophia and Laura Lee within a day of each other. How do you think this is going to affect their relationship? So we know from the synopsis and kind of the type of writer Nora Roberts is that they're going to have a relationship, that Raylan is Adrian's love interest in this book. And I think them losing both Sophia and Laura Lee, they're going to be able to connect on that level because they both lost someone very close to them within a day of each other. But it's more than that as well. There's also a bunch of cross connections. You know, Raylan thinks of Sophia as a grandmother to him, and then Adrian has developed a friendship with Laura Lee through correspondence, a handwritten correspondence, which we know she puts a lot of value in throughout the years. And so there's also a bunch of those cross connections that I think are going to come into play and really deepen their bond, and develop that relationship. And then this is the rough one, and it is about the school shooting. So, while trying to hold it together after learning about the shooting but not knowing what happened to Laura Lee, Raylan comforts himself that Laura Lee knows what to do as they have shooting drills, and it had made her sad that it was necessary to have such drills. What are your thoughts on the relevancy of this in today's society? And I really don't want to get into a debate about gun control, so keep it civil in the comments. I just want, you know, it is relevant in today's society. And I debated whether including this question or not, but I thought it was important to talk about because it has become such a commonplace thing. Like, the shock value of school shootings has diminished because it's all the time. And the fact that we do need school shooting drills now, it is necessary. That line really like struck a chord with me. And I mean, I was already crying at this point after, you know, Sophia's accident, but this really got me going because it did hit home. Even if you don't have kids or you never had kids or loved ones go through a school shooting, it is such a part of today's society and it is scary. And if you don't have kids, a lot of us still know somebody who works in the school system. My sister-in-law is a teacher, and so it's definitely, I don't know what the right answer is, and like I said, I don't want a big debate about gun control and versus keeping your guns or gun rights, whatever the case may be. I didn't say that very well, just but I don't want to get in a debate about that. But there is a problem. Our kids shouldn't have to go to school wondering if they're ever going to be involved in a school shooting. They shouldn't have to go through school shooting drills. Kind of off topic, but I mean, I feel for these kids because I'm really scared of fires, and I'm in counseling, and I've spoken about it with my counselor, and one of the reasons I think I am so fearful of fires is because it was drilled into us in school. Stop, drop, and roll. There was constantly fire drills. We were constantly told, to have evacuation plans at home, like get with your parents and create a evacuation safety plan. And so I could just imagine going to school nowadays and having to go through school shooting drills and being that constant stress that adds to them having to do that. It's not okay, and I don't know what the answer is, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. So on that heavy note, let's go ahead and move to chapter 8. And so in chapter 8, we see Tisha in a similar role to Adrian as Mimi was/is to Lena. How does this show the similarities between Adrian and Lena on a more personal level? Because we've already discussed, how they kind of reflect each other on a more professional level, their ambition, their drive, their brands, and such. And so I think this does show the value and the loyalty they have to their friend, like the value they hold in their friendships and their relationships. And especially for Lena, who is very closed off and very, distant with people. The fact, Mimi has been so close to her throughout her life really shows the value she holds in that relationship. And we see Tisha the same thing. And so I think that's definitely something they have on a personal level. Adrian just is able to be a little bit more open with different people, where Lena is kind of distanced. But like I said, when they do let people in, they value those relationships and they're very, very loyal to them. And so I think that kind of speaks on the similarities between them on a personal level. So, and then next, on that same note, how does Lena only staying a few days while Adrian relocates after losing Sophia speak to their differences? And I think the key difference is the way they take comfort. They're both doers, like they're both being very proactive as far as what comes next. But for Adrian, that means relocating and being closer to her grandfather and being closer to where she considers home and where she had a lot of happy memories with her grandma. um but she's still very proactive. Like she has a plan. She's already thinking about converting space and how she's going to make the business work, and what's necessary to make this move happen. Where Lena is still being very proactive, but she takes comfort from continuing to strive and build something, and continuing to move forward. And so we see she only stays 3 days. I'm sure that's all she felt was necessary, and then she gets back to business. But at the same time, she also still is thinking about her father and what he needs next, and she knows he shouldn't be alone. And so she is, looking into nurses and home help for him. And then she gets upset with Adrian because Adrian's she thinks Adrian's not focusing on her business, but Adrian still is. Like she's like, no, I already have a plan for that, but this is what's important and this is what is necessary. Where Lena's focus is more, keep moving forward and not changing more things up. Um, do what necessary, but on the same level that you were already at, essentially. So, Lena focuses more on like professional growth and such, where Lena's focusing more on the relationships, I think. And then the next question is, we, along with Adrian, get a quick glimpse of Lena's grief. Do you think she is processing the loss or suppressing it? And there is no right way to grieve. And so I think there is a level of suppression in Lena, but that's how she heals. Like, she heals by focusing on her career and her business and continuing to move forward. And so that's what's working for her. I don't think if she was one, to dwell on it, that would be healing for her at all. This is how she's processing the loss, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think there is a certain level of suppression on it, or in it. And then the last question is, Adrian thinks her move has rattled the poet, as a letter came outside of the annual tradition. Why do you think it would have? And this is where the other theories I talked about really come into play. And I kind of have two different theories on this. I think the first one would be um, that the move, her moving, we know he stalks his victims and he really kind of gets to know his victims. And so her moving throws off everything he's learned about her and everything he's kind of planning for her, because now she's in a different place with a different routine. And so it kind of throws that off. But the second theory I'm leaning towards more is that he caused the accident for Sophia because with Sophia because he knows that would cause Adrian to come back home. He knows that, or she. Again, we don't know. We don't know if it's a man or a woman, but they know that. They've studied Adrian. They know how important her grandparents are, and so I think even if Sophia had just gotten hurt and not killed, I think that would still cause Adrian to come home, and I think they are at the point now where they're ready for her to be right where they want her. And so they wanted her home, and they caused the accident knowing that she would come home. And that's kind of my theory on it. Like, they're ready to kind of set their plan in motion for her. They probably have gone through the rest of the victims that they wanted to, and now they're ready for her. And that's another reason why, after the threat, they waited so long. And I don't know if they had this plan when they sent the threat or it developed after, kind of as they festered and everything. But I do think, that's why they waited so long to act on the threat, because they weren't ready yet. So that's kind of my thought on it. Let me know, any of your thoughts on these questions, and also let me know what you thought about these 4 chapters. Like I said, they were kind of heavy, especially chapter 7. But let me know what you thought. I, like I said, really, really enjoying this book, and I can't wait to get into the next 4 chapters, which are chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that's what we will be reading this week, and then next Monday we will discuss those chapters. Anyway, let me know what you think, and happy reading. We will see you next time. Bye.